It was 1980. Lakeview Free Methodist Church in Akron, Ohio, had a new young pastoral couple. Charles and Brenda Young had arrived just over a year before to a congregation of about 50 people who loved Jesus and their church and were ready to do anything to make it grow. An outreach program called HAND began and was the genesis of community outreach that eventually became a distinguishing characteristic of the church. A group of senior adults called Encore began monthly dinners and service opportunities. Those saints became the prayer backbone of the church. By the spring of 1980, the church family had grown in spiritual vitality, attendance, and faith, and we were ready to take on new challenges. With about 125 attendees, we were outgrowing the small church building on Belle Isle Drive. We were out of parking spaces, and Dean Stevenson's adult Sunday school class filled up the whole fellowship hall in the basement, which also filled up with water every time there was a hard rain. But the room was named very well. Fellowship and food happened in there at every opportunity. The year's big event was a grand homecoming. Old-fashioned costumes abounded, while the community and old friends gathered to celebrate a revival and a new thing that God was doing. In the era of huge hair, tiny basketball shorts, and big dreams, this small but mighty and faithful church family decided to begin a new future. We redesigned ourselves as Cornerstone Church, bought almost 9 acres of property on Killian Road, hired an architect, and began a journey for a great new future. We were growing spiritually and kept taking steps in faith. In 1983, we hired Dwight Mason, a senior student at Ohio Christian University, to be our youth pastor, and a group of young people began to grow. Soon we had 40 to 50 teens attending every Wednesday night. We bought a bus to transport people to church and to enable adventures for senior adults. CYC Wednesday evening programs became a great outreach and opportunity for children. Our church family was flourishing at all age levels. The Killian Road property became a home for Cornerstone long before the building was erected. Pastor Charlie began a daily prayer walk around the perimeters of the property every single day and praying for God's people and that wanted to meet on that holy ground. And it began to happen. During a tent revival meeting on the property in 1984, more than a dozen people received Christ. A buyer from the old building came before our new building was ready, so we had to find a place to meet. On January 8, 1984, we held our last day of worship on Belle Isle Drive, and it was a day of thanksgiving and praise. We began renting the Seventh-day Adventist Church building in Akron. This continued over a couple of great years as Cornerstone witnessed God moving among us and grew into a beautiful family of all ages. Groundbreaking on Killian Road was such an amazing day. October 14th, 1984, we worshiped at the Seventh-day Adventist Church and then formed a processional to the new property. Pastor and leadership expert John Maxwell came to help us celebrate and dedicate the land to the Lord. Great memories were made during the building of the church. 1984 to 1986 were days of blood, sweat, and tears. In heroic generosity, longtime Cornerstone family member Butch Riggs donated his services when the original contractor abandoned the job and took our money with him. While there were parents framed, painted, cleaned, and even put the roof on the building, kids roller skated on the poured concrete cement floors. Workdays went on all week, and many a picnic was held on the raw sanctuary floor. Church families wrote their names and scripture verses on the door frames before the drywall was installed. Funny story, the porter pots were accidentally framed into the building and had to be pumped completely, then turned on their sides and handed out through the windows. There were many trials along the way, but it was all well worth it. The engraved Cornerstone on the front of the building was mounted in 1985. On Mother's Day, 1986, we officially began gathering for worship services in the fellowship hall. The rest of the building was also still in progress, so our offices operated from a small trailer set on the hillside while we continued building. More hard work and effort filled that summer, and on November 23, 1986, Bishop Gerald Bates, in an overflow crowd, joined us for Dedication Day. What a day of joy, gratitude, and satisfaction. Not only was this church facility built by the hands of the people, but by their dedication and sacrificial giving, raising money with their talents and hard work, and faithful, mighty prayers. Cornerstone grew into our community. We loved them, and they loved us back. We became known for serving our neighbors in ways that had never been seen before. Our egg hunts quickly became legendary. Our love of fun and good times bonded us tightly. Our young people were becoming adults and key leaders. During this time, we acquired the historical and treasured nativity that had graced downtown Akron for decades and began a tradition of yearly lighting celebration that embraced the community. Ministry to children was and is a central value for Cornerstone. Our volunteer teachers gave and served to shape and mold young lives to become the church and community of leaders today. Over these years, a group of amazing visionary people with a dream to plant a church in the area began attending Cornerstone Church to learn from us and capture our unique church DNA. In 1986, in a high school band room in Dalton, Ohio, a new church was born. Pastor Charlie was the founding pastor, and for about 18 months, he would speed between Dalton and Akron every Sunday morning, preaching during our Sunday school hour and arriving back just in time to walk onto our platform to preach. Today, Living Water Dalton is still a thriving church body with a multi-site in Massillon. Cornerstone Church began the decade with around 75 dedicated people and very young pastors. They grew together and loved each other into greatness. By the end of the 80's, the church family had grown to 200, and Pastor Charlie and Brenda's family had grown by 3. The wonderful church family, who surrounded the youngs with prayer and examples of Christ-like love, had no way of knowing that the children they were loving and leading would one day grow and lead their own children and grandchildren to Jesus.